Assalamu alaikum dear students and welcome back. I hope you are doing absolutely wonderful. So we are doing this course of communication and presentation skills together and this is our fifth lecture. In today's lecture we'll talk about public speaking strategies. Now we usually have speaking opportunities at work or in daily life. Now, at work, you may be speaking to sell your ideas, to convince your colleagues or your boss about some wonderful idea that you have, and there can be some technical presentations that you have to deliver, and it can be some customer presentations or reviews that you have to deliver. So these are the scenarios that can be there to speak at your workplace. And similarly, in daily life, we have to speak and we have to interact. There can be a student teacher interaction. You may be speaking with your friends, family members, and it can be some club meetings, like you may have joined some of the clubs at your university, and you have to speak with people in those clubs. So these are the scenarios where we usually interact with people. Now, first of all, we'll talk about the similarities between public speaking and conversation, and after that, we'll talk about the differences between public speaking and conversation. Now, in both public speaking and conversation, you have to organize your thoughts. Organization of thoughts is very important. For example, if you are giving some directions to your house, first of all, you have to organize your thoughts, and then you have to deliver those thoughts to the other person in the form of the speech. You may have to think about left and right, because if that is your home and here you are standing and there are some streets going to your house, there can be 3 or 4 ways leading to your house. All right, so you have to first think and organize your thoughts, right? And then you have to deliver your thoughts, or you have to guide the other person. And similarly, you have to tailor your message to the audience. Same question can be asked to you by people belonging to different age groups. Like, for example, your 5 year old nephew or somebody, some child at your home can ask you a weird question. Now, the same question can be asked by a 12-year-old, and same question may be asked by a 22 years old. Now, would you be responding to people from three different age groups in the same way? No. For a 5-year-old child asking a question, you have to think about an answer that is suitable for a 5 years old individual. And if a 14 years old individual is asking you a question, you have to think about the words that should be appropriate for a 14 years old individual. And if somebody from the 20s or from the 30s, or a mature individual asks you the same question, now your selection of the words, your style of answering the question should be different. So what you have to do is that you have to tailor, you have to change, and you have to make your message suitable according to the age of the audience. And telling a story for maximum impact is the ultimate purpose of doing the conversation. So the tip for this is that you don't have to tell the punchline of a story first, because if you will tell the punchline of the story in the beginning, the people will lose their interest in the story. So you don't have to do that, right? And then you have to adapt to the listeners feedback, right? So for example, if you're delivering a speech and people, they are making some angry faces, or they're getting restless, so you should not continue. Then you have to adapt, you have to change yourself according to the listeners feedback, right? So for that, you have to watch for the non-verbal feedback, the facial expressions, their body movement, their postures, right? Their nodding. You have to be careful about that. Okay, there can be some looks of confusion, there can be some looks of pain, or there can be some hurtfulness in the audience, and you have to tackle the situation, you have to adapt according to the listeners feedback. Now let's talk about the differences between public speaking and conversation. Public speaking is more structured. Conversation is a very flexible communication, and public speaking is basically more structured. In public speaking, usually the time is limited, and the questions are not allowed to interrupt the speech. In conversation, if you are talking about something, the other person can cut you and ask you the question. But in public speaking, most of the times, the speaker is supposed to deliver the speech first, and the question answers are usually left for the end if the time is if the time is given, or if there is some time for the question answers. Otherwise, most of the times the speaker comes, makes the speech, and that is the end of it, right? Now, the second difference between the public speaking and conversation is that public speaking requires more formal language. Now, in public speaking, you cannot use slangs or jargons or bad language. Slangs are basically the words that are used in daily life, the street language, the language that we speak off the screen in daily life with friends, okay, in the street with the vendors, okay, and that traditional, that typical language that is usually spoken, of the academic situations. Jargons are basically some particular words that are used in a particular situation. For example, in IT, we use some technical vocabulary in law, in medicine, in engineering. So there are some particular technical words that are only understood by the people who know the field, right? So that vocabulary is basically called the jargons. Now, in public speaking, you should avoid using the slangs or jargons or the bad grammar, because in public speaking, mostly you may be addressing the message to people from diverse backgrounds. Now, if the people are having a diverse background, then you should not be using some specialized vocabulary, because if you will use like for example, if you are talking to 100 people and you are using some technical vocabulary of information technology or artificial intelligence or software engineering, so out of those 100 people, for example, if there are only 10 people who have a background in computer sciences, and rest of the 90 people, they are from different other backgrounds, so they will not be able to understand your technical vocabulary of the computer science. So it is better advised that if you are delivering a public speech, so you should be avoiding the slangs and the jargons, right? So speeches should be something special, so that they qualify as life events and they are remembered, right? So you don't have to make your speech boring, or you don't have to make your speech look like incomprehensible. Speech should be something, a moment of your glory, and it should be a moment of limelight for you and for the audience as well. Like, you should be making your speech interesting and interactive and productive, so that people, they remember your speech as a moment of happiness, right? And the third important thing about public speaking is that it requires a different method for delivery, right? In conversation, it is very flexible, and you can have a comfortable or a convenient style. But in public speaking, you should be more formal, and you cannot have vocalized pauses, the way we usually speak. You should be avoiding these kind of vocalized pauses if you are delivering a speech. And you don't have to use the stock phrases. Stock phrases are the phrases that people repeatedly use. For example, basically, I mean, I was about to say. So these kind of words you should be avoiding if you are going for the public speak, right? This is the speech communication process. First of all, we need to have a speaker, and a speaker is basically the person from which the speech communication starts. And the speaker usually conveys a message. Whatever is communicated is called message. And in order to communicate the message, we need a channel. Channel is basically the medium or the means by which a message is communicated. And when the message is communicated or initiated from the speaker, there must be a listener. There must be somebody to listen. Listener is basically the receiver of the communicated message, right? And then when the listener listens to the speech, he gives the feedback, because without feedback, the speaker cannot know whether his words are being understood or not, right? So feedback usually comes in many forms, and it must be understood by the speaker so that he can know whether he is going successful in the speech delivery or not. Now in this process there can be some interferences, there can be some problems, there can be some disturbances, right? So anything that is impeding, that is restricting, or that is creating disturbance in the way of the communication of the message is called interference. That can be a noise, that can be some glitch, there can be it can be somebody in the street, it can be some welding work going on, it can be some construction work going on, it can be some above the head an aeroplane going on. So there can be different types or different ways of interferences that can be there. And then the important thing is the situation as well, the time of at the time and the place of the occurrence, right? So the speech communication process, it varies from time to time and from place to place. For every time there is a certain requirement, and for every place there is a certain requirement, right? So you have to be careful about the time and the place of occurrence of the communication as well. Now in this process of public speaking, okay, listening is also very important, because it's not, when you are delivering a speech, it's not the speech, or it's not your own style that you should be worried about or thinking about. You should be thinking about the listening skills as well, because listening is very important and in our daily lives we listen to many more speeches than we will deliver. Now most of the times we are listening to people, and in only very few occasions people they deliver the speech. Most of the times they are listening to other people, right? So you should be very much careful about the listening skills. Listening basically helps in order to develop the critical thinking, and many Fortune 500 companies provide employees with listening training. Now from this you can understand the importance of listening, that 500 successful companies, they actually provide their employees with proper listening training. They train their speakers, they train their employees in listening skills, because listening is very important. And there were some studies carried out, there were some researches made, and according to those researches there is a direct link between academic success and the ability to listen, right? Because if somebody is a bad listener, and if somebody cannot listen actively, he cannot produce good results. In order to produce good results, in order to get A plus in every subject, the first and the foremost requirement for a student is to be active in the class. And by active means listening to the teacher very carefully. So listening is basically directly proportional to your grades. If you are a good listener, you will be able to listen to the teacher actively, okay, and attentively. And if you will listen to the teacher actively and attentively, and you will understand whatever the teacher has been saying in the class, obviously you will be having more clarity of the concept, and you will be having more knowledge, and that knowledge and that clarity of concept is actually going to make you successful in that subject. And if you are doing this for all of the subjects, obviously you are going to be the person who will be the topper of the class, right? So there is a direct link between academic success and a person's ability to listen and understand the message. Now there is a difference between listening and hearing. These are two different things, and you should be knowing that. Hearing is basically an automatic physiological phenomena. Somebody is speaking, whether you want to pay attention to that or not, your ears will be receiving that sound, okay. But what is listening? Listening is basically hearing to some words, hearing to some sounds with a purpose, with an objective, with aim to understand, right? When somebody is speaking in front of you and you are paying attention and you are trying to understand the message, you are basically listening. And if some people are talking in front of you and you are not paying attention, just words are coming to your ears and you are not paying any kind of attention and you are not taking interest in that, so that is basically hearing, right? So in the next class, I may be asking you the difference between listening and hearing, and you should be coming up with a proper preparation about the difference between listening and hearing, and you should be coming up with some interesting examples as well about the difference between listening and hearing. All right. Now let's talk about the connection, the relationship between listening and critical thinking. And before that, we'll talk about the four basic types of listening. The first type of listening is appreciative. Listening for pleasure or enjoyment is called appreciative listening. For example, listening to some music, watching some movies and listening to the dialogues, watching some comedy movies, watching some plays, and listening to some of the funny stuff. That kind of listening is basically called the appreciative listening. Then we have the emphatic listening. Okay, emphatic listening is basically listening to provide some emotional support for the speaker. Okay, for example, there is somebody, and that person is feeling bad, or something bad has happened with the person, and that person wants to share that experience with somebody, and he or she thinks that you are the one with whom he or she can share the experience or share the thoughts. Now when somebody is talking to you about his or her problems, and you are listening to that person, and you are trying to provide some emotional support to that person, that kind of listening is called basically the emphatic listening. Then there is the comprehensive listening, and this is the kind of listening that usually is required from the speakers in the classroom. Listening to understand the speaker's message, right? Direction to a friend's house, when you are in the classroom, you are attending a seminar, and you are listening to some instructions about something. So that kind of listening is basically the comprehensive listening. Then the critical listening. Critical listening is basically listening to evaluate the message. Okay, you are listening to a campaign speech, you are listening to a peer's research paper. Peer mean your class fellow, the person from the same age group. Okay, so you are listening to the people and the salesman's, you can say that, briefing about the product. That also comes in the critical listening. This, in simple words, you can say that whenever you have to make a decision after listening to something, that is basically the critical listening. Now, what is the difference between listening and critical thinking? Comprehensive and critical thinking require you to think and evaluate while listening. This helps develop critical thinking skills, because whenever you are listening for the critical purpose, or when you are listening for the comprehensive purpose, in these two situations you need to analyze whatever the message is conveyed, whatever the speaker is saying, you have to analyze it. And in order to analyze, obviously you need to have some analytical skills. Okay, so from this you can understand that listening actually creates some critical thinking skills. Okay, and listening is very important to develop critical thinking skill. Now let's talk about some causes of poor listening. Okay, not concentrating on whatever the speaker is saying is one of the causes, one of the major causes of poor listening. For example, the speaker is delivering a speech, and the listeners, they are daydreaming. Okay, or their mind wandering. Mind wandering means the teacher is delivering a lecture, and the student is thinking about the match that he has to play after the class, or the speaker is thinking about some plans on weekend, or the speaker is thinking about the previous day or something else. So that is basically mind wandering. And dozing, like the speaker is delivering the speech and the people, they are sleeping, right? So these are basically the ways that shows that the listener is not concentrating on the speech. Then listening too hard. Okay, what is listening too hard? Trying to remember every fact, no matter how minute. It's not minute, it's minute. Minute means small. Now some of the people, they try to understand each and every word that is being spoken by the speaker. Now that is also bad listening. Okay, because if you will try to do this, you will not be able to do that. If somebody is going to speak for 1 hour, like for example, in universities, mostly the lecture is 90 minutes lecture. Now how is that possible that in those 90 minutes, whatever the teacher will say, you will you will be able to understand each and every word, right? So that's not possible. And then jumping to conclusions, that is also cause of bad listening or poor listening. uh, and what are the ways of jumping to conclusion? Putting words into the speaker's mouth. Somebody is speaking something, and before he finishes the sentence, some of the people, they cut the person and they try to complete the sentence for the speaker. This is something very offensive. This is something very bad, and you should not be doing that. When somebody is trying to say something, let him or her complete the sentence, and then you can add something, or you can contradict, or you can ask the question. Putting words into the speaker's mouth, that is one of the ways of the poor listening. And interrupting the speaker, anticipating what speaker will say or do next. Anticipate means to make a guess about something that will happen in the future. Now these all are ways of jumping to conclusion, and it comes in the poor listening. And then focusing on delivery instead of message. Now this is what most of the times students do. The speaker, the teacher is delivering a lecture, and instead of listening to the words of the teacher, they are looking at the teacher's dressing, they are looking at the teacher's shoes, they are looking at they're looking at random things in the classroom. So when you are paying attention to the speaker's accent or clothes or the stuttering or the presentation tools, so this means that you are basically focusing on the delivery instead of the message, and that also comes in the poor listening, right? And what is better listening and how you can be a better listener? You have to take listening seriously, okay? Because like any other skill, it takes practice and self discipline to be a good listener, right? And you have to resist the distractions, okay? When you catch your mind wandering, make a conscious effort to pull it back on the track. Whenever you feel that this, you are getting away from the speech, or your mind is trying to distract you, try to make a conscious effort to pull your mind back on the track. Try to anticipate what the speaker will say or do next, okay? And by this you can maintain your level of interest in the speech, right? Whenever you're listening to somebody or something, there can be so many distractions, right? For example, I'm recording this lecture at 11 o'clock in the evening, right? And it's absolutely peaceful, but my daughter can wake up and she can create a distraction for me. And you may be listening to this lecture while you are driving, or while you are traveling in a metro bus, or you are in your home, and there are people who are around you who are speaking and who are trying to distract you. So what you have to do is that you have to resist those distractions. You have to try to focus on the things that you are listening to, right? It is very important. And you should not be diverted by appearance or the delivery. We have talked about it, that you don't have to focus on the appearance, you have to focus on the message. And you have to suspend your judgment, okay? You should not be getting judgmental. You should be listening to the speaker, and then and only then deciding about whether he was saying right or not. And then you have to focus your listening, okay? And while you're listening, you should be listening for the main points, because in a good speech, there will be only few points, okay? And you have to focus on those few points. And then you have to listen for the evidence, okay? Whatever the evidence is provided to you in the speech, you have to think about that, whether the evidence is accurate or not, and the sources of that information, whether they are objective or not, and if the speech is relevant to you or not, and if it is sufficient to support the speaker's claim or not. And then you should be listening for the technique as well. You have to study the speaker's technique as a learning tool. When you are listening to somebody, and there is a speaker, so you have to pay very close attention to the speaker, and you have to try to understand and learn the good qualities of the speaker, so that you can implement those qualities in your speech when your time of the speech comes, right? So you should be paying very close attention to your teachers. You should be paying very close attention to different speakers, because this is how we learn, We observe, and while observing we take some of the good aspects of the speaker, and then we try to implement, we try to practice those good qualities of other people, and this is how we improve ourselves, and this is how we progress, right? Then analyzing the audience is very much important, because good speakers, they are always they are audience centered. Why good speakers are audience centered? Why they give so much value to audience? Because the primary purpose of speech is to get a desired response. You always speak because you want something to convey, and if you are not paying attention to the audience, then you cannot get your job done. Okay, so you have to keep the audience foremost in mind at every step of preparation and presentation. While you are preparing the presentation and while you are delivering the presentation, you should keep this in your mind, that to whom are you speaking, who will be the people you will be talking to, and what is it that you want them to know, what is it that you want them to believe, and what is it that you want them to do as the result of the speech, right? And then you should be thinking about this, that what is the most effective way to compose and present your speech to accomplish these ends. So if you can do these three things, this means that you can have a wonderful speech, and you will be able to do your job in a very effective and impressive way, right? Now, understanding the psychology of audience is also very much important, because it is up to the speaker to make the audience choose to pay attention. All right. Now, when people are in front of you, and if they have come, this means that they are there to listen to you. Now it is up to you if you can maintain the level of the interest of the audience or not, right? So every speech basically contains two messages. One is from the speaker, and one is that is received by the listener, right? Now it's not always that whatever you are saying, it will be understood by the speaker at the 100% level. That does not happen. Why? Because people hear what they want to hear, and they disregard the rest. What does not please them, what makes them unhappy, or what is contradicting with their beliefs or their personalities, they will just disregard it, they will just ignore it, and this is the fact, right? Why? Because people are very egocentric. Egocentricism means the tendency for people to be most interested in themselves. They give so much value to their ego. They give so much value to their own problems and the way to solve them. Right? So, what you have to do is that you have to understand the psychology of the audience. You have to think about those things that will be most interesting for the audience, right? And then you have to include those things in the speech, and people, they pay close attention to what affects their own values, their own beliefs, and their own well-being. So you have to be very careful about this. And then demographic audience analysis is also very much important. Okay, you should be looking for the observable audience traits. Okay, you have to identify the general features of the audience. You have to gauge their importance to the situation. There can be a situation that is very important for you, but this may not be important for your audience. Maybe people may belong to an area where whatever is important for you, that may not be important for them, because they belong to a different class, or they belong to a different area, right? So you have to gauge, you have to measure, you have to calculate the importance, like how that problem is important for those people, right? And then you have to look for certain traits of the audience, like what is their age, what is their gender, what is their racial, ethnic, or cultural background, and what is their religion. Because highly charged emotional issues, if you're talking about some religious issue, you have to be sure to consider the religious orientation of the people. Otherwise you might end up being embarrassed, because when it comes to religion, people do not tolerate if something is against their religious values. Okay, and then you have to talk to think about the group memberships of the people as well, right? Because people judge you by the company you keep. Okay, so this is also very important. Then you have to do the situational audience analysis as well, because people, they may belong to the same area, and they may belong to same age group or same religion, but they will be different in different situations. So the situational audience analysis, it is built on the demographic analysis, and it identifies traits that are unique to the speaker's situation. For example, when people, they are limited in number, they behave differently, and if they are large in number, they behave differently. And the physical setting is also very much important. Okay, when people are sitting in comfortable places, they will behave differently, and if you will make them stand, or if they are not comfortable and if they are not getting place to sit, they will be behaving differently. And their disposition, their opinion, or their response towards a topic is very much important. uh, Sometimes the topic interests the people, sometimes it is knowledgeable for you, and sometimes their attitude to the topic is positive, and sometimes it is negative. So you have to understand the situation as well. Okay, and sometimes people, they have a very technical disposition towards the speaker. Sometimes they like the speaker, and sometimes they don't like the speaker, and then they have a particular disposition towards the occasion as well. Okay, in certain scenarios, in certain occasions, people behave differently. So you have to do the situational audience analysis as well, and then you have to adapt, you have to change yourself, you have to mold yourself according to the audience. Now, before the speech, there are certain things that you should be doing before the speech. There are certain things that you have to do during the speech. Now, before the speech, you have to assess how the audience is likely to respond. Now, before your speech, you have to sit down and you have to think that, okay, if I will say this, then how people will respond to that. And then you have to adjust what you say to whatever you are trying to say. In order to make it clear, appropriate, and convincing, you have to adjust yourself according to the audience. During the speech, things may, or things will not go exactly as you plan. You may have prepared a PowerPoint slide, and when you go there to deliver the speech, the PowerPoint, the projector is not working, your PC is not connecting with the projector, the light goes out, right? So there can be so many problems there. So what will you do then? You have to think about it. Now, if things are not working according to your plan, you don't have to panic. You have to remain calm, and you have to try to adapt yourself. Adapt means that you have to mold yourself, you have to adjust yourself according to the situation, right? And then you have to remember, and you have to ask this question to yourself: who am I speaking to? Who are the people in front of me? And what do I want them to know? What do I want them to believe, or what do I want them to do, right? And then you have to think about that, what is the best way to accomplish this. Now, as I already told you, that these three are the success keys. These are the success secrets of the speech. And then, in addition to this, you have to practice, and you have to keep practicing until you get the desired results. Now, organization of the speech is also very much important, right? Now, when it comes to the main points of the speech, you can number, you can write them in numbers, right? It is better to be remembered for covering 3 to 4 points well, than to leave the audience confused and sorting out 7 or 8 points you made. Now, instead of talking about so many things, it is better to speak about very few things, but do that in a very effective and in a very understandable way, right? Now, there can be some strategies that you can adopt to make an order of the main points. You can arrange your points in chronological order, in spatial order, in causal order, in problem solving order, or in topical order. Chronological order means that you can arrange them according to the time. Like if you are talking about something historic, you can say that this happened in 1920, in 1930, 1940, and then you can go to the last period of time. You can arrange the things in spatial order according to their features, according to the some certain qualities. You can arrange things, and then you can arrange things in a causal order, like if this happens then that happens, if this happens then that happens. You can make your points like this, and you can do in problem solving solution order as well, like if this is the problem, that is the solution, if this is the problem, that is the solution, if this is the problem, that is the solution. And then you can go for the topical order as well. You can cover first topic, and then you can move for the second topic, then you can move for the third topic, and then you can move for the fourth topic, right? And in terms of the main points, each main point should be independent of the other main points, right? So that if somebody comes late and you are about to start point number 3, so he should be able to understand the speech from that moment afterwards, right? Matlab aisa na ho कि if somebody gets late just for 5 minutes and you have to speak for 60 minutes, so just because if somebody is 5 minutes late, should not be having trouble understanding the remaining 55 minutes of the speech, right? So you have to use the same pattern of wording for each main point, and you have to balance the amount of time spent on each main point. Like for example, if you have to talk about 4 main points in 40 minutes, now you should not be doing this that on one point you spend 35 minutes and then you explain the remaining 3 points in just 5 minutes. Alright, so this you should not be doing. You should be basically spending, you should be trying to create a balance in the amount of the time that is spent on each main point, right? Now, in order to organize a speech, the supporting material, the organization of the supporting material is very much important, because the supporting material is this flesh. Okay, it is the crux, it is the body that fills out the skeleton of your speech. Because without supporting material, without evidence, the main points are only assertions, they are only statements if you do not have the supporting material, if you do not have some evidences, right? Because listeners, they need supporting material to accept what the speaker says. Okay, if you make a statement and if you do not have some supporting material, the audience will not accept, the audience will not even be able to understand what you are saying, right? And there are 3 major types of the supporting material. It can be in the form of examples, it can be in the form of some statistics, like in the form of some facts and figures and numbers, and it can be in the form of some testimonies. Testimony is basically an opinion or a statement by somebody credible, by somebody known. Like if you are talking about philosophy and you give some of the quotations by Aristotle or Socrates or Ibn Rushd or Ibn Khaldun, so this means that you have some strong quotations, you have some strong sayings by some wonderful people, and that will actually make your speech more persuasive and more powerful. And you always provide source to give credibility to the supporting material. Whatever you're saying, if somebody wants to go and check it, then you should be giving them the source that okay, this is what I am saying, and if you want to verify it, you can go and read that book, or you can go and get the material from so and so sources, right? So this is how you should be doing. Then in order to organize your speech, you can use some connectivities. Okay, you can use some transitional words, you can do the internal previews. Okay, and internal preview means that you can let these internal previews basically let the audience know what the speaker will take up next, right? You can give a short summary, okay, so that whatever you are going to say next, the audience can relate with those things. And there should be some signposts in your speech as well. Okay, there can be some numbers, and you can introduce a main point with a question like what makes this so, and you can come up with some simple phrases. So you see, there should be some connectivity, there should be some logical relationship between the contents of the speech, otherwise it looks very vague and it looks very ambiguous, right? Now beginning and ending of the speech is very important, right? You have to get attention and interest in the beginning, you have to reveal the topic in the beginning, you have to establish credibility and goodwill, and you have to preview the body of the speech, right? And in the end, you have to tell that we are moving towards the end, and by the end of the speech you have to reinforce the central idea. You have to you have to talk about the importance of the central idea, right? Now when it comes to the language, language is very important. Now you should ask this question to yourself, that how well do I use language? Okay, do you confuse the use of good and well? Do you use phrases like terrible disaster or a good benefit? Do you use in the eventuality instead of if? Do you clutter your speech with meaningless words, as you know, like, basically, man, and really? So you should be asking these questions, because this is how you will come to know that whether your language is perfect for the speech or not, right? Then you should be avoiding the classic examples, okay, because the classic examples can be sometimes ambiguous and they can be very hard to understand for the audience. So this, in simple words, I can say that you have to try to keep your speech as much easy and simple as possible, okay, because meanings of the words, they are also very important. And words, they have two kinds of meanings: the denotative meanings, or we call them the dictionary meanings as well, and the connotative meanings. Connotative meanings are basically the meanings that are suggested by associations or emotions triggered by a word or phrase. Now, and the connotative meanings, they give words their intensity and emotional power. Now, the same words may have completely different effects on different audience, right? So one word that you are using, it can have different effect on people having different religious background or different emotional or cultural background. So words can be very tricky, so you have to be very careful about the words that you are using, right? So you have to use language appropriately according to the occasion, according to the audience, according to the topic, and to the personality and to the requirement of the speaker, right? And when it comes to the speech delivery, there are four types of speech delivery. The first one is reading from the manuscript, okay, and it is only done when absolute accuracy is required. So you might have seen that the politicians, most of the times, when they are doing some formal speeches, they are reading from the script that is given to them, so that they do not make any mistake, right? And then the second type of speech is reciting from memory. Now it is seldom done, and if you have to do memorized speech, then you have to do rehearsal, okay, and you only have to do this when you are doing when you are comfortable in doing it, right? Otherwise you should be avoiding this. Then the third type of the speech is impromptu, that is speaking with little or no preparation, then and there speech. Somebody, you're sitting somewhere and somebody says that please come on the stage and talk about this. Now that kind of speeches are called the impromptu speeches, they without any preparation. You should be avoiding this unless you are extremely comfortable with the subject, right? And then the last type of the speech is extemporaneous speech, and we call it extempore speech as well. This is a speech which is carefully prepared and it is delivered from a brief set of notes. Instead of bringing the complete speech and reading it word by word, when you make some points and with the help of those points you deliver a speech, that is basically called the extemporaneous speech. Now, whatever the type of the speech, whether you are reading from the manuscript, whether it is a memorized speech, it is impromptu, or it is extemporaneous, it should sound spontaneous, it should sound original, even if it has been rehearsed extensively. If you have been even if you have been rehearsing, doing the rehearsal and the practice for like 20 times, but while you are doing it, you should be doing it in a way that it does not look fake, or it does not look so mechanic and robotic, right? So this is very important. And in the speech, non-verbal communication is also very important, okay. And in non-verbal communication, the kinesics, the study of non-verbal body motions as a systematic node of communication, kinesics is very much important, because people trust their ears less than their eyes. What they see, they, as it is said that seeing is believing. What they see is more important to them than whatever they are hearing. When a speaker's body language is inconsistent with their words, the listeners will tend to believe their eyes, You are saying something and you are doing something. So what you are doing is going to be more valuable to the people than whatever you are saying, right? So this is very important. And there are some other aspects of non-verbal communication like personal appearance, body actions, gesticulation and eye contact. And you should be very careful about non-verbal communication as well. And when you are delivering a speech, you can include some of the visual aids. You can include some objects, some models, photographs, drawings, graphs, charts. You can bring some slides in the videotapes. You can bring some computer generated graphics. You can bring some transparencies, and you can even use the multimedia in your speech, right? And while you are preparing the visual aid, you should be very careful, and you should prepare all of the helping material before the speech well in advance. And you have to make sure that they are large enough, because whatever the material that you are bringing with you should be, you should be able to, that material should be able to be seen by all viewers when it is presented, not just to the upfronts. Sometimes the people, they use the whiteboard and they write so small that only first two to three rows can see that, and the people sitting in the back benches, they are not even able to read it. So if you are using whiteboard, you should be writing on the whiteboard in a way that it is readable for each and everybody. Okay, and then you have to use easy to read fonts. Non-serif fonts are harder to read, so you should be avoiding those curvy and those those strange kind of language you should be avoiding. And you have to use a limited number of fonts. You should be using the colors very effectively. You should be knowing that what to highlight and how to highlight. And you should be using well proven color schemes, because knowing this, that what color works well together with which color, it is a very tough choice for most of the people. That is why you must have noticed this, that most of my presentations, they are black and white, because black and white combination is a very universal combination. But if I go for some other colors, I may have to sit down and think about it, maybe for hours to decide before the color scheme, right? So this was our discussion about the public speaking. We will be having some other points about about public speaking in the next class as well. But if you have any kind of question about the things that we have discussed so far, you can ask the questions in the comment box, and you can note down the questions, and then you can ask those questions in the live class from me as well. So this was it for today. If you have not watched the previous videos, in the description of this video you will find a link. You'll just click at on that link, and that link will lead you towards the complete playlist of the course, where you can find the previous videos and the upcoming videos as well. You can save that link in your notes, on your mobile phones, or you can bookmark this video, so that whenever you have to move to the next video, you can simply click and you can come back to this video. So that was it for today. In next class, we'll be talking about some other interesting topics of communication and presentation skill. Please take care of yourself. See you in the next class. Allah Hafiz.